ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयो श्रित्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः। नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। Welcome back to the third session. Um, I want to start with reading out an excerpt from this book, which, as far as I know, has not been translated into English. This is called Jivan Mukti Sukha Prapti. Jivan Mukti Sukha Prapti. It's a compilation of reminiscences of conversations with Swami Turiyanandaji, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, and who was known as a staunch non-dualist Vedanta in all his life. There are many interesting insights, especially into the subject which we are studying now, devotion and knowledge. I'll read out a portion which I found particularly fascinating and insightful. Here, Swami Turiyananda is talking about knowledge and devotion. The idea that I am one with God, I am Brahman, and I am different from Brahman. I am a devotee. The Lord is my master, father. And he's talking about the unique perspective of Swami Vivekananda compared to the rest of us. All right, I'll read out the Bengali for precision, and then I'll give a quick translation. Swamiji, this is Swami Turiyananda speaking. স্বামীজি যখন আমি বলতেন তখন সবটা নিয়ে আমি সেই আমি বুঝতেন সবটা নিয়ে যে আমি সেই আমি বুঝতেন Swami Vivekananda, whenever he would say I, what he meant was the I identified with everything, in oneness with everything. আমরা আমি বললে এই দেহ মন ইন্দ্রিয় নিয়ে যে আমি সেটা এসে পড়ে সেই জন্য আমাদের বলতে হয় দাস আমি ভক্ত আমি whenever we say I, what comes up inevitably, we helplessly sort of refer to ourselves as this body, mind, and sensory system, this bundle, body, mind bundle. This is what we mean inevitably by I. It doesn't seem to be an option for us. So, what's the consequence? He says, Shaijono, therefore, we should say, or we have to say, I am the servant, I am the devotee. We don't, it doesn't, it's not very honest for us to say, I'm everything. All right, next. স্বামীজি আমি বলতে উপাধি গ্রহণ করতেন না তিনি পরমাত্মার সঙ্গে এক হয়ে আমি বলতেন when Swami Vivekananda would say I, he would not refer to or take into account the upadhis. Upadhis means the body, the mind, the personality. These for him were appearances. He would identify himself with the ultimate reality, with the supreme self. Paramatmar সঙ্গে এক হয়ে আমি বলতেন আমি বললে তিনি মন বুদ্ধির পারে চলে যেতেন এইটা তার প্রধান ভাব এইভাবে তিনি প্রধানত থাকতেন The moment he would say I, Swami Vivekananda, he would transcend body mind. He's in the body mind. He's in the Vivekananda form, but he would transcend it. He would not be referring to this particular form. Instead, he would go beyond, he would transcend that. And then he says, this was his main attitude or the primary state he was generally in. Pradhanata means primarily. Not that he did not, Vivekananda did not talk in a dualistic vein. Sometimes he did. But primarily he was in this non-dualistic vein, in this non-dualistic mode, in this non-dualistic attitude. It was natural to Vivekananda. এইভাবে তিনি প্রধানত থাকতেন he would stay in this attitude on this state primarily আমাদের তা আসে না it doesn't come easily to us who is saying this Turiyanandaji but it's sort of he's speaking for us আমরা তা থেকে আলাদা একটি হয়ে বসে আছি Somehow we have become a little bit, a little different from that ultimate reality. We are sitting cozily, somehow separated from the ultimate reality. We think of ourselves as separate and everything else as separate. সেই জন্য আমাদের তুমি তোমার বলতে হয়. Therefore, we we have to, or we ought to say thou and thine. Thou, my Lord, it is thine, my Lord. Question. সেই বড় আমিটা আনবার জন্য যাদের দ্বৈত সাধন তাদের অদ্বৈত গ্রন্থাদি পড়া ঠিক কিনা? It's an interesting question. So those who are primarily in the dualistic mode, yes, they want to go to that great I, the ultimate reality, but they're primarily moving through dualism. I am a devotee, thou art my Lord, in that mode. So is it good for such people to read non-dualistic texts and listen to talks on non-dualism, just like Swami Atmarupananda gave? Is it good for devotees to listen to such talks, read such books? Answer. ঠাকুর বলতেন অদ্বৈত ভাব আঁচলে বেঁধে যা ইচ্ছে তাই করো. Sri Ramakrishna would teach, tie the knowledge of Advaita or the attitude of non-dualism to the hem of your cloth. That means sort of make it your basis and then do whatever you like. যে ভক্ত তুমি তোমার করে অর্থাৎ বলে হে প্রভু তুমি সব তোমারই সব তা থেকে আর অদ্বৈত তফাৎ কি? That devotee who says, thou art all, my Lord, thou art everything, thou and thine, everything is thine, thou art all. From that devotee, where is the difference between that devotee's attitude and non-duality? There isn't much of a difference anymore. যে ভক্ত আমি আমার করে তা থেকে আলাদা ভাবে ওর তো এই মহা অনিষ্টকর দ্বৈত. The devotee who emphasizes the I and mine and also believes in some God out there. He says, this is a very destructive, very damaging kind of dualism. সে মহামায়ায় পড়েছে, মোহগ্রস্ত হয়েছে. He has fallen into the clutches of Maya. He is in delusion. The one who emphasizes, protects one's own little identity. And also there is a God who's going to help me out in this life. That's a kind of duality, which is a damaging kind of duality. ঠাকুর জপ করতেন নাহম নাহম তুহু তুহু দাসোহম দাসোহম. Sri Ramakrishna would do japa, repeat. Naham naham means not I, not I. Tuhu tuhu, thou, my Lord, thou. Dasoham dasoham, I am the servant, I am the servant. ভক্তের পক্ষে আমি আমার ভাব একেবারে ত্যায্য. For a devotee, it's very interesting. For a devotee, the the attitude of I and mine, this holding on to I and mine, and then engaging in devotion, that is to be given up. Don't hold on to this my problems, my list of grudges, and my long list of complaints, my little life. Nobody cares. And in fact, even God doesn't care because they are not really important. They're not even important. Every night you forget about it. Your own endless list of grudges and complaints and gripes and problems. No. So this is what he says. ভক্তের পক্ষে আমি আর আমার একেবারে ভাব একেবারে ত্যায্য. All right. I thought this is really beautiful. It says a lot about what is truly non-dualism, what is truly dualism, and how, notice, he is talking about both as two aspects of the same thing, and talks about the relative advantages and disadvantages of the approaches to the same thing. All right. Now, let me get into the subject. Which we're going to talk about now, which is we're going to learn about devotion from the sage Narada. As you might know, I'm going to guest. I'm speaking about the Narada Bhakti Sutras. Narada is a beloved character, often a little mischievous in Indian Puranic stories, but always his mischief has some higher purpose behind it. He gets, does the Lord's work. So the Narada Bhakti Sutras is a set of aphorisms, sutras, setting up a system of devotion. So we are going to learn from the sage Narada I'm going to refer to this particular edition of the Narada Bhakti Sutras. There are others, of course, notably a beautiful translation by Swami Prabhavananda ji, published by the Vedanta Society of Southern California. But this one is a commentary on the same sutras by Swami Tyagishananda ji, who was a very saintly and a vastly erudite scholarly monk of our order long before my time. I have never seen him. Um, and in the second sutra of this book, the first sutra is just, he's saying, now we're going to explain devotion. We're going to explain bhakti. The second sutra dives straight into it and says, we're going to look at what the second sutra is, and we're going to look at the comments of Swami Tyagishanandaji, and you will see what I meant by vast erudition from that little sutra, how much he draws. So the second sutra of the Naradiya Bhakti Sutra, that's the topic for the next few minutes. The second sutra defines bhakti. So we're going to talk about bhakti. We should know what bhakti is, what devotion is in its various dimensions. The sutra goes, Satu asmin parama prema rupa. That, bhakti, is verily of the nature of supreme love of God. It doesn't even actually say God. Intense love or supreme love in this. It just uses the word this for God, Brahman, Atman, all these technical sectarian terms. He avoids completely, makes it very impersonal and says in this, intense love for this. And just keeps it open. What is this? Now, I'll make a few comments about it based on Tyagi Shanji's observations. Now, this supreme or intense love, remember this, it's important to understand the distinction between para and apara bhakti. Apara means relative, beginners, where we are when we start loving God. This is called apara bhakti. And it's a spectrum. It increases, it intensifies, it becomes more and more important in our lives till it becomes overwhelmingly important. But when it ripens, it is called parabhakti, and that's how it's been defined here. So when you say intense love for this, the point is one should not feel discouraged. One might think, well, I don't have that kind of crazy, intense, one-pointed, all-consuming love for God, so I don't have bhakti. No, no, no. We do have bhakti, but we have bhakti which is on the way to this. This is called apara bhakti. And this, if we pursue it, if we are diligent about it, it will mature into para bhakti. Point being, what has been defined here? The supreme love for this is the final form of bhakti. It's like defining the tree by, a fully laden mango tree with delicious mangoes and very green and heavy laden with fruit. And on the other end of the spectrum, the seed. So from the seed to the sapling to the growing tree to the full bumper crop of mangoes, it's a long journey, but it's the same thing. It goes there. So we are on the way. We may not have this, but we will have it in time. The second word is a small word, which tu, sa tu. In Sanskrit, tu means but. And often in the sutras, every word, every syllable is pregnant with meaning. So what it means, tu means here is what bhakti is and what it is not. So what bhakti is and what it is not. And Tyagishanji makes several points here. I'll just mention some of the important highlights. So bhakti is not worship of spirits, demigods. Hinduism is bewilderingly complex. So there is a vast range of practices. Now, bhakti is worship of God. There is only one ultimate reality, and bhakti is love, worship, surrender to that. Not to a variety of deities, not to lower angelic powers. No, it is exclusive devotion to God. It's not worship of spirits or demons or whatever. All those are set aside. Whatever they are not part of bhakti. Also, Bhakti is not for favors. We'll speak more about that later. There is a huge kind of bhakti which is prevalent in Hinduism and in every religion. That is what one might call the mass religion. We go to the Lord mostly for help in our worldly affairs. So somebody is sick and we want that person, a beloved person, to be cured. Nothing wrong in it, as I will say presently, even God says that. But that's not the kind of bhakti Narada is speaking about. We go, sometimes somebody wants a job, sometimes somebody wants success in a career or in relationships, or somebody, this election season, both in India and in United States, somebody turns up at the temple or the church to seek for blessings for, winning the election. So all of these are not bhakti according to Narada. They're all set aside by the little word tu, but not that. It is only love of God for the sake of God. Love of God for the sake of God. Sri Krishna makes this distinction. He says, it's not that if you approach God for worldly things, it's anything bad, but it's not the higher kind of bhakti that Narada is speaking about, not what we are speaking about in this retreat. Sri Krishna says there are four kinds of devotees: Artha, Jigyasu, Artharthi, and Jnanicha. Krishna says, Chaturvida bhajante mam. Four kinds of devotees. They're all blessed. They're all good people. Some people are in trouble and they worship me. They want help. Some people are not in trouble, but they want more in life. Maybe jobs, money, success, winning an election, something more. They're more than what they have. And they also worship me. And these two categories comprise the maximum, the bulk of people turning up in temples and churches. And most people turn up for these things. And Krishna does not deny them. He says, that's all right. People come and they will get what they want. But they don't want me. They don't want God realization. They don't want enlightenment. The third kind of devotee is the spiritual inquirer, Jigyasu, spiritual inquirer who wants to know, does God exist? Can I see God? Can I find God? What's the point of this universe? What lies after death? The fundamental questions of life. So this person is a spiritual inquirer. Like Vivekananda, Narendranath goes to Sri Ramakrishna and says, have you seen God? He doesn't ask for a job. He doesn't ask for money. He does. Have you seen God? So this is called a jigyasu, an inquirer. In fact, the path of Jnana Yoga begins with jigyasa, an inquiry into the ultimate reality. And that's a devotee too. And finally, Krishna says, those who have found me, those who are enlightened, the sages, for whom God is our ever-present reality, they are my devotees too. It's not that once you find God and you say, it's done, I've checked the list, I wanted to realize God, and I have realized God, there's no need to practice it, I'm done with that, let's move on. No, you never do that. Then that becomes really, God becomes real for you, really real for you. You are what would be called a saint, an enlightened person. So that person is also my devotee. So Krishna says four kinds of devotees: people in trouble, people who are not in trouble, but they need more stuff, they want stuff, people who are seekers. So I think in that third category, we all fall. And the fourth category is the one who is enlightened. And Krishna says among, they're all good, but for me, the fourth one is the specially dear one because he lives in me truly. Because for the fourth one, I am real. God is really real for that one. For the rest of us, we are on the way. So here he makes the point that only the person who's seeking God and the person who has found God, bhakti is for them. The earlier one is a kind of bhakti which is, I put it this way, using God for my life or my life for God. So God for my life is like a convenience. A washing machine is convenient to have. A dishwasher is convenient to have. Wi-Fi is convenient to have. Similarly, God is convenient to have, makes my life easier. So that kind of using God for a better life, personal life, career, relationships, community, good, nothing wrong in it. But that's still the lower religion. Here he makes the distinction. We are not talking about that. It's practical advice. So when we, in our spiritual path, often the problems are because we have muddied the waters with personal desires. Let's push those desires aside, then the pure love of God comes much more easily to us. Next point. This is something that Swami Tyagishanti makes a good deal of, but only of marginal interest to us. The point is this. When you say intense love, a question is asked sometimes, and it's an issue in devotional traditions in India. Any kind of intense focus on God um, should work. In the sense, there are mythological characters, Puranic characters in the Indian tradition, some of whom were enemies of God, some were jealous of God, some fought against God, some were, always in terror of God. Kamsa was in terror of God. When Ramachandra, the Ravana and Hiranyakashipu, the demons and Rakshasas, they hated God. But the story goes, and Shishupala, another well-known character in the Mahabharata. So they were jealous and they hated the incarnation of God, Rama or Krishna or whoever. And they go to heaven and they attain God after their death. So the question is, only love of God will take you to God? Is that bhakti? Or could you hate God also? Will that work too? And here, Narada and the interpretation given by Tyagi Shanji is quite clear about it. He says, those are interesting questions, but set them aside. They're academic for us. You better love God. Don't start off by hating God. My path is to hate God, and that's how I'm going to attain God. Don't try that. Let's just keep it very clear. Stay in your lane, love God. All right, moving on. So he just makes a point that not from fear, not from hatred, not from lust, fear also. Often there's a kind of religion which encourages fear of God. That might be okay as a beginning, but just as a beginning. And it can be quickly damaging. That if you start with fear, fear is the enemy of love. You can't really love and be scared at the same time. So even if religion starts with fear, better than fear is awe and reverence. That's a good start. And then, but one must quickly move on to something more familiar, close, and intimate, which is love. So love of God, not fear or being scared of God, and not hatred, not for greed, not for anything else. All this from the little word to. Then, so what is this intense love? And Tyagishanji here pulls multiple scriptural quotations, gives us a flavor of what this intense love could be. For example, um, from Narada Pancharatra, Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. What it means is, with our senses, freed from their attractions to, the eyes want to see nice things outside. The ears want to hear music, the voices of beloved people, whatever, bird song, and so on. Our senses have their favorite objects. Tongue wants to taste nice food and the favorite tastes. Now, what is done is get rid of that and use the senses to connect to God. How do you connect to God? Well, what I want to see is not other people or the latest Hollywood blockbuster, but I want to see the divine icon, the beautiful face of God in art, in photographs, in like the photographs of Sri Ramakrishna or Ma Sharada or Vivekananda, or the iconography of the divine in various spiritual traditions. I want to see that. I want to see holy places. I want to see the beautiful temples of God. I want to see sages and saints. Nothing worldly. So now I'm using the same senses, the eyes, to connect me to God. Or the taste. I love this cookie or that pastry, but no. Now I want to taste the prasad, the sacred food which has been offered to God, because it has been offered to the Lord and it comes back as, offered food. That's what I hunger for. That's the taste that I want. The deliciousness of the food offered to the Lord, the food offered in the temple or an ashram. That's what I want to taste, not anything else. So in this way, ears, I want to hear talk about God. I want to hear music about God. I want to hear prayers about God. All the religions, in my tradition especially, but in everything else. That kind of yearning, same the senses, which engaged us and trapped us in the world, are now helping us out of the world. You see, the same powers. You're still seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, but they are now pulling us out of the world. And there's a little play of words here which need not concern us, but it's delightful for the Sanskritists among you. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. So one meaning of the meaning of Rishikesha is Krishna, but it also means the Lord of the senses. So using the senses to connect, to serve, to become united with the Lord of the senses. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. Bhakti Rityuchyate. This is one meaning of the intensity of love. How you can get that intensity of love? Using all the powers which have been troubling us and trapping us in the world, use them to pull you along towards God. These are powerful energies. The desire to see, it's a very powerful energy. A neuroscientist said, why we close our eyes when we want to focus, why we close our eyes when we want to meditate. Because when you open your eyes, apparently a huge part of our cognitive processing capacity immediately kicks into operation, and it's used because due to for this visual processing. So that's why we close our eyes. Now, when you want to focus, now you can open your eyes, but use your eyes to see the Lord, not anything else. There used to be monks. I have seen at least one such monk among the elders. That you might find it eccentricities, but they are beautiful eccentricities. They would want to see the face of Sri Ramakrishna when they opened their eyes first thing in the morning. So they would be very careful when they woke up not to open their eyes. They knew where their shrine is, or the picture, their personal picture of Sri Ramakrishna is. So they'll carefully turn around there and then carefully open the eyes, so that the first thing they would see in the morning is the face of Sri Ramakrishna. Like that. There are so many things, so many practices. Then another one. This is from various sources. Gopala Purvatapani Upanishad. Bhakti Rasya Bhajanam. What is Bhakti Bhajan? What does it mean? In what particular sense? Etad ihamuttara upadhi nairashyena amushmin manah kalpanam. Bhakti is adoring service of him, that implies centering on the mind on him, expecting no other gain here or hereafter. So love, bhakti, is loving God, is equal to serving God, and for what? For nothing else. I am fulfilled because I get to do this for God. That's it. That's the best thing I've got in all my life. And I am so obliged. I am so eternally grateful that the Lord has given me this opportunity to do this little loving service of God. Point being, we will get the results of bhakti, taking us beyond suffering, giving us endless fulfillment. But if we keep it as a target in mind, it spoils the whole thing. Rather, if I 110% I say, I love God, and I'm very glad I get this opportunity to do this little thing for God, little thing every day, moment to moment. Great. I don't want anything else. Then you'll get everything else. Uh, and much more than one could expect. We couldn't even imagine. Then another example. These are all, what am I doing here? Various angles of that intense love. Bhakti is intense love for this. मनोगता रविच्छिन्ना हरो प्रेम परिप्लुता अभिसंधि विनिर्मुक्ता भक्तिर विष्णुर्वशंकरी. The constant flow of mind brimming with love towards the Lord without any selfish desire is bhakti, and the Lord is attracted. Attracted means, here the word uses vashankari, um which sort of ties the Lord. The Lord is trapped, wouldn't be the right thing. Is attracted by it, is intensely pulled by it, is irresistible. All right, let's put it this way. The Lord is irresistibly pulled by this kind of love. The constant flow of mind, full of love, affection, reverence towards my beloved Lord. That is bhakti. Another one. या प्रीतिरस्ति विशेषु अविवेक भाजाम सैवा उच्यते भवति भक्ति पदाभिधेया भक्तिस्तु काम इव तत्कमनीय रूपे तस्मात् मुने तस्मात् मुने रजनी कामुक वाक्य भंगी. Okay, this is a very poetic way of putting it. The fondness with aviveki, that means indiscriminating people, worldly people. The fondness with worldly people have for sense pleasures, for eating, drinking, making merry, partying. If it is diverted to the Lord, it is called bhakti. It is like lust for the object of one's love. Hence, the sages get the name lover by way of figure of speech. Right. So this is what I mentioned earlier. The power of bhakti, we all have it. It's flowing in 100 streams towards the world. 100 different expectations, desires, I want list. All of that, if we divert it into one almighty love of God, that is called bhakti. That's called bhakti. In that sense alone, sages and saints are called lovers. Okay, I think we get the idea. Let me move on because we'll run out of time. These are all beautiful quotations from various scriptures which show us what Narada means by bhakti. What it is not. Just like revered Swami Atmarupananda said, what Advaita is not. Bhakti, it's important to know what it is not, and it's easy actually. But it's good to point it out. Bhakti is not sentimentalism. This is important because often in the name of bhakti, people give way to sentimentalism, tears, crying uncontrollably, expressions of, unchecked expressions of emotion. No. The more inward it is, the more quiet you are on the surface, the more deep and genuine these feelings will be. The moment you feel an upsurge, we feel an upsurge of love for God, let us not give expression to it. The moment you give expression to it, the power is lost. Most of it is lost. Keep it quiet. In our tradition, we value those monks, those practitioners who are quiet and reserved and placid on the surface, but may have powerful emotions towards God within them. That is very beautiful. And that is very praiseworthy, that kind of control. Sri Ramakrishna would go into ecstasies of dance and, he would weep at the name of God. All of those things, of course, they were all genuine. It was the highest expression of para bhakti. But even beyond Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother, Ma Sharada, it is said that she had all those expressions of bhakti. She had all those movements of bhakti within her. Hardly ever anybody saw external manifestations of that. Then fanaticism. Bhakti is not fanaticism. It's an interesting and telling point that fanaticism, hatred, and even violence in the name of religion usually comes from the religions of love. It is the devotional religions which emphasize love, prayer, surrender, faith. They are among the most violent, um, full of hatred against the other, and often giving rise to actual fighting, terrorism, warfare. It all comes from the religions of devotion and love. And that's not so strange as it might appear on the surface, because it's emotion. So if emotion is primary, very quickly, love of something can quickly flip into hatred of another thing. So especially for the unrefined, if at the beginning stages, when I find if I catch hold of something with intense love and faith and belief, it's very easy to feel superior. I have the right belief. I have caught hold of God. Everybody else is wrong. And if my religion unfortunately tells me that, yes, you have the right belief, you are going to go to heaven, those people are going to go to hell, and it's your now duty to tell them that they are wrong and maybe bring them to the right path. Then it's done. The results are horrifying, and it's there for everybody to see. So bhakti is not fanaticism. It's easier for the paths of knowledge and meditation to avoid fanaticism. At one time, I used to think fanatic people were wicked people, and religions which taught fanaticism were wicked. But then I read Vivekananda, who in fact explained it so well. He says in exactly the same language that he's at first thought fanatics were wicked people. Then he says, I realized that fanaticism is a kind of mental illness. It's not the same person can be a very good person in every other aspect of their life, good fathers and mothers, members of the community. But when it comes to religion, they turn into veritable demons, against the other. So it's a kind of mental illness, and nobody is free from that in the world. You can be fanatics about religion, you can be fanatics about politics, you can be fanatics about your favorite team, so on. But bhakti is not fanaticism. Fanaticism does not go with bhakti. Bhakti is not blind faith. Bhakti is not reading lots of scriptures or reasoning or metaphysical speculations. All right. Um, Bhakti is not a selfish love. It checks worldly desires. This is an important point to make. So I have already said this, but I'm repeating it. Often, in India especially, but in other religions also, people will immediately describe themselves as bhaktas. We are devotees. Of course, we believe in God. We observe all the major festivals. We go to temples and we have a shrine. But if you see what we do with that shrine and the festivals and temple is, we are full of prayers for this and that. Or if nothing else, a person might not have prayers for jobs or curing illness or, but it could just be that I go to the Lord just so that everything is okay in my family, in my life. The blessings of God are there with me. There is no specific prayer for a higher love of God. There is no specific prayer for, devotion, for enlightenment, for God. No. In that case, that is not bhakti. That's not the bhakti we are talking about. The bhakti we are talking about is the love of God for the sake of God realization. Love of God for the sake of God, and not for worldliness or even for worldly blessings. Those will be there with you. Don't worry. God will take care of you. If you walk on the path towards God, God will take care of you. That's his responsibility. When bhakti checks worldly desires, I mentioned this earlier. This is one powerful way, to the extent that knowledge cannot do so easily. Even meditation is shaken by worldly desires, but bhakti checks worldly desires because it is the same energy, the same power which is pushing us out towards the world that is harnessed by bhakti. One of Sri Ramakrishna's young to-be monk, monastic disciple, asked, "How do I overcome lust?" And he said, "Why should you overcome it?" Sri Ramakrishna surprised the disciple, young boy, by saying, "Why should you overcome it? Redirect it towards God. Increase it. Redirect it towards God." So this is it. It checks worldly desires and it turns everything towards God. How much time do I have? Mataji, you're muted. Uh, can you hear? 1 second. I hope my thing is not acting up again. Why can't I hear?
There we go.
Yeah.
We had a problem with unmuting. Swami, we're in the question period. You have until 12:05 to receive and answer questions. So the first question is, even through our chanting, we are seeking at least peace at the end. Yes. All Vedic chants are seeking something. How can you explain that in the light of love of God?
Yes. Remember, seeking something is not wrong, as long as it is not self-seeking. If you seek something, peace for the world, peace for the community, peace in the environment, or peace so that I can attain to God. Let things go well so that I can attain to God. That's all right. Because one might ask this question. Bhakti, desire for God is also a desire. How can you say you're transcending all desires? After all, it's a desire to want God. And Sri Ramakrishna was very clear about this. He said, The desire for God is not to be counted among other desires, because it brings to an end all other desires. This is just what we discussed. True bhakti checks worldly desires. So the desire for God is not to be counted among desires.
Swami, in the beginning of spiritual life, this path of devotion, it's sort of like an arranged marriage. So where is devotion then? And what are the signs that we can expect to show that we're really on the right path? What are we reaping in the beginning?
In the beginning, yeah, the arranged marriage is a good example. Hopefully in this arranged marriage, not all arranged marriages end up with mutual love. As somebody said, whether arranged marriage or marriages, which start with love in the beginning, with generally all marriages tend to end up in mutual loathing. So, but in the love, that's because human beings, if it's not mutual loathing, you're lucky, you're blessed. But human beings, we throw our love on a human being, and even that one human being we do not know all that well. It's mostly our projections. Plus, that human being is continuously changing. So over the years, that person has changed from what we knew at the beginning of the relationship. No wonder it leads to unhappiness and strife and struggle. Not so with God. The Holy Mother says that if you love human beings, it will lead to sorrow. It's not that you should not love human beings. If you love human beings in general, that's wonderful. But that's not what we mean by loving human beings. What we mean is one person, this person, my husband, wife, or romantic partner, or the child. This is the person that I love. And that's too much of a weight for any human being to bear. The entire expectations of one another human being, and that you have to be everything to that other human being, that's too much. Whereas God can easily bear that load. So, love of God will always ultimately be fulfilling. In the initial days, you're right, that joy, that sustaining fulfillment will not be there. Therefore, we have to put in some hard work at the beginning. But know that it is not so difficult. Just see how easily we get attached to people, we get attached to pets, we get attached to objects, places, food, jobs, just about everything. We have a tendency to get attached. So if you stay with God for some time, you will get attached. And that attachment is wonderful. It will just go on increasing until it becomes love, it becomes bhakti.
Swami, does bhakti yoga work for a novice if he or she focuses their love on a spiritual guru rather than a deity or an imaginary Lord or God?
Certainly, but you have to see God in the guru. Don't see the person. Often the advantage of loving the guru is it's a real person in front of us. And one can be very devoted to that person. But if you're devoted to the person as a person, you're asking for trouble. One must quickly transcend the personality of the guru to the divinity within the guru. That my Lord, my Sri Ramakrishna, my Ma Sharada, my Krishna, my Christ is shining through this person who is my guru in this life. And yes, I pour out my love and devotion and service as my spiritual practice to the guru. That's great. But my inner attitude is strictly impersonal. So it's an interesting combination of personality and impersonality. So for example, in our order, we regard the president of the order as the guru. Now we have the 17th president of our order, Swami Gautamananda ji. And it's not that we are transferring our loyalty and allegiance from guru to guru. We see the continuation of the same guru power, the same power of Sri Ramakrishna in all the gurus which have come and which are yet to come. So immediately we have the same devotion and respect, because we are seeing something impersonal in the personality. That's what we must do.
Swami, in the beginning of our relationship with our chosen ideal, there's enthusiasm. But then there may come a period of dryness. where we don't feel a response from within. What does that mean, and how do we deal with it?
Yes, that's the nature of the mind. It's so in everything, in every pursuit of the world. You take up your favorite, study your favorite subject, play your favorite instrument. There will come difficult phases when you feel like giving it up. Don't, hold on. This is the most precious thing in your life. This is what will stay with you throughout our lives. It will stay with us beyond death also. Nothing else accompanies us. Our samskaras do accompany us, but this is the most powerful, most valuable thing that we have ever got in our lives. Don't worry about the dry patches. They will come and go. And the dry patches are not that there's no response from the other side. It's just the nature of the mind. It goes through like waves and troughs. Once it's in a dry patch, if you hold on, it means even a greater surge is coming after that.
Can you explain the difference between devotion and emotion?
Yes. There are multiple differences. Emotion, I would say devotion is also emotion. Devotion is powered by emotion. I would rather see the difference between devotion and sentimentalism, what I just called sentimentalism. Notice sentimentalism is fickle. It may be powerful. At one point, you may be overwhelmed with tears and great waves of emotion for God, but it goes away. As soon as it came, it goes away within moments or minutes, and then brings a period of dryness or even worldliness after that. So it comes, one feels elevated, and then one feels equally worldly and engaged in the world outside again. Again, it comes. These are sentimentals, this is sentimentalism. Don't worry too much about it. Don't give value to it also. Devotion is deeper and it persists. It's a kind of loyalty which will be there lifelong. And it's much more valuable. Emotionalism or sentimentalism is always mixed with worldliness. There is some worldly element in sentimentalism, whereas devotion is purer. It's not mixed with worldliness.
Also, just one last question on this particular tact. How do we know the difference between our devotion and just becoming attached to ritualism?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially for Hindus. Hindus have this thing for ritualism. They love ritualism, which is, I think, as a counteractive, like medicine, Vivekananda brought about the Advaita ashram high in the Himalayas, completely banning all kinds of ritualism. Yes, one should not be against ritualism. Swami, one second. Yes. Swami Ashokanji writes in one place the value of ritualism. He says, I've benefited greatly from ritualistic puja, but keep it controlled. If you have rituals, have the basic minimum, don't let it proliferate. Ritualism has a way of proliferating. Revered Swami Ranganathanandaji, who was the 13th president of our order. So the tradition in Belur Math is the priests and the worshippers, they go to the president and bow down before performing any big ritualistic puja like Durga Puja or Shivaratri Puja. And whenever they would bow down to Swami Ranganathananji and say that we're going to start a big puja, he would say, cut it short. Cut it short. So it has a tendency to proliferate. Um, so don't let it proliferate, and always give importance to the higher practices of meditation, of study, of prayer, rather than external ritualism. However, if you have a ritualistic bent of mind, it's not a bad thing at all. It's a very powerful method of spiritual practice. Often we need to start with something physical. I have performed ritualistic puja in Deoghar Ramakrishna Mission, in Sharada Peeth, and also another place. And I do it here also rarely because we have only 4 pujas in a year. But every time I do it, I cannot deny the uplifting and purifying power of the ritual. It immediately works. So a basic set of rituals, please maintain it. It has a powerful effect on the psyche. Jonathan Haidt, who is a well-known psychologist working here in the United States, in one of his earlier works, it's called uh, the uh, the happiness hypothesis. happiness hypothesis. He talks about the power of ritual. He actually went to Orissa and Bhubaneswar, which is a city I grew up in, so that struck a chord in me. He went there, and there are very ancient temples. Bhubaneswar is called the city of temples. In a Shiva temple, there is this pond in which holy pond in which the priests every day take a dip before performing the rituals in the main temple. And so he goes and gives these Brahmin priests a set of questions, a battery of questions, psychological test about their attitudes to life in general, before the rituals and after the rituals. And he finds there's always a distinct difference. You know, a person always feels higher, more liberal, more peaceful, more serene, more kind, compassion in every the positive traits, temporarily at least. After the person has performed a set of rituals in the temple and come out, they respond significantly differently to these questions about attitudes to life. So he says, look, how these rituals impact our mind. And of course, he says you can't do the exactly same rituals in the Mississippi and expect the same. An American can't do that in the Mississippi and expect the same results. Says the problem with rituals is it comes with a huge baggage of a cultural past, of conditioning. That's what makes it work so powerfully. But anyway, the power of ritual, one must admit and harness it for one's benefit.